Ecos, First Continent. This is your review for 2. Good day, my name is Joe Gerba. Today I'll be going over Ecos, First Continent and how it plays with 2 players. Now, Ecos is a game for 2 to 6 players where you'll be crafting this continent. You'll be expanding with either jungle tiles, desert tiles, water tiles, adding mountains and trees to the board, adding animals, having animals eat others, and all of these may give you various amounts of points. And as you progress through the game, you'll earn points, and the first one to 80 after the wild card is drawn is the victor. Now let's see a little bit more how to play. So in a 2-player game, you'll start off with 5 cards face up and then another handful of cards that you can play throughout the game. And during this game, you'll be drawing these tiles. These tiles have different symbols on them. And as these symbols are drawn, you'll be able to put a cube from your supply onto the card, matching the symbol drawn. And both players will be able to do this at the same time. Once a card is filled up with all the appropriate symbols, one person says Ecos, and then the tile drawing kind of stops for a second. You do the actions on the card. The actions on the card may expand the continent, they may put terrain pieces out, or they may put an animal out, or just do various things that can either add more resources to other cards or get you victory points. And like I said at the end, whoever has 80 when the wild card is drawn is the victor. Now, as we go through these, one person will keep drawing these tiles until a wild is drawn. Once a wild is drawn, all these tiles are put back in the bag. We check to see if 80 points have been achieved, and if not, the other person gets to draw. Now, what's interesting about these tiles is there's kind of various amounts. There's 10 of one symbol, there'll be 8 of another, 6 of another, and so the tougher to get symbols will be more sought after on your bigger and more point efficient cards. The gameplay is actually pretty simple. I explained most of the game without going into too much detail, so let's see what I thought about the game. The components of this game are pretty neat. You have chips for animals. You have some mountains you can put out. You got some trees. The tiles, these are double-sided, so you got forest on one side and desert on the other side. The setup is simple for this game. You deal some cards out to each player. There are starting decks that you can deal out to each player. And then as you go through the game, you can draw a few more cards. The setup is nice and easy. The takedown is pretty easy. Everything has its spot in this game. The table size will be just about perfect by a 3x3 standard card table. Be tough to get more than 2 people around it, I think, but 2 is probably the perfect size for that kind of table. The rules themselves are pretty straightforward. The rule book isn't that large, and once you've played your first game, it kind of cascades down. It's very easy to teach. In the 2-player game, you draw 2 tiles at a time, and then you'll be putting your cubes down. In the 3+ player game, you'll just be drawing 1. So you can definitely just kind of quarterback the table and say, hey, just, does anyone have this tile? You can place one of those. It's very easy to teach. The rules, there really aren't, there isn't that much to it. The references, you didn't need a whole lot. There was only 1 or 2 terms that you needed, whether it was a community or a habitat. But once you got those down, it's a fairly straightforward and easy game. The playtime, our last playtime took about 50 minutes. The box says 45 to 75. This was a 2-player game, and it was pretty spot on. It was nice and quick. Like I said, the setup was easy. They're predetermined decks if you want to play with those, and it was just easy to learn and teach. Now let's talk about the gameplay a little bit. I have a little mixed emotion about this part because it's light engine building. I want to say very light. There's cards that give you the higher resources as you progress through them. Like some of them may the more abundant resources may fill up a card, and this card may give you resources on other cards that are a little bit harder to get. So there's it's really small engine building. There's a ton of cards, which is really neat for the replayability. But there's not a whole lot to think about other than, do I want to put my resource on a card over here or over here? There's a little bit of resource management. You only start with 7 action cubes, and as you go along the game, and there's some symbols you may not be able to place your cubes on. If there's none available, you'll be able to turn your little player dial. Now this is a neat part. It's kind of, if you can't use a tile drawn, you start to turn this little player card. After 2 turns, you'll be able to potentially draw a new card to your hand, not play yet, and then you go back to start. And after 3, you can either play a card or get another action cube. Now if you have too many cards out here, you'll need more action cubes, because you'll partially fill some of these up as you go. And it's kind of like it is a balancing act. Like I said, kind of engine building light. And I really want to emphasize, light, because you're not getting these terraforming Mars. I need to do this, and this. It's very, I finished this, so this cascades down to this one and cascades down to this. And then you rotate all those cards, take your cubes off. And it's just, but it's a nice, simple, quick game that can be, easily taught. I enjoyed putting these animals out, the different interactions. When the predators kind of came out, you can get points for eating other animals. And so it was neat to build this, board, to build this, continent with all these different animals. I do wish the animals you could get were a little bit more abundant, but as you play cards, as you draw cards, you can put more down. And there's a lot of options in this game. And like I said, in a 2-player game, I do like that. It's quick and simple, and like I said, just very easy to teach. The replayability is pretty high. They give you plenty of cards to play with, and there are these starter decks. And that's one thing I do want to talk about, is we tried the starter decks a few times. We really enjoyed that, where there was certain cards that we start off with and we get to choose some to actually have face up, and the rest did start in our hand. And those were a set of cards. Now there was also a drafting variant once you get more experienced, but when we found we did the drafting variant, the game didn't quite flow as well. And that's one of the rough things in this game, is when you have the drafting and you don't know exactly what kind of card combos you're looking for yet. If it's your first couple times playing, it's really tough not to just be overwhelmed and not know where to go with your cards. So I'm really glad they give you some starter decks. And to be 100% honest, I don't think that we'll do the drafting again. I enjoyed the setup, just getting the base amount of cards. And if you want more cards, after 2 spins of your dial, you'll be able to draw more cards and play them down. In the 2-player game, you have plenty to start up with. In the 3+, you have less cards face up, so it'd be more important to get the cards out that you need. But in the 2-player game, your starter plus a couple extra that you're going to draw are plenty to finish the game with. And I do think that's interesting, but like I said, it does make it nice and simple to play. And that's one thing that's very appealing about this game, is there's not a whole lot to it other than, what's on the cards. Now on to a few final thoughts about this game. You start off with 7 action cubes, and I really think that it's a great economy mechanism, that you only have so many to place. Once a cube comes out, you put it on a card, and it's kind of there, because you don't want to take any cubes off, because you've already made progress towards doing this card. And it's really neat, the balance between how many cubes you have, how many cards you want to play, getting points. Do you build your engine early, or do you just kind of get points as they come? There's a lot of different ways to play. None of the games we've played have actually been very close. It's the first one to 80, and usually one of us ends around the 50-ish, and then the other person ends around the 80 plus. So usually we haven't found a game where it's really neck and neck yet, and that's it kind of takes away, but you're still having a good time. But there can be kind of a runaway syndrome. You know, if somebody has a certain card that, you know, just scores you a lot of points, and then you realize that they can do it 2 or 3 more times depending on which card it is, and that card's going to score them 8 points, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. The interaction in this game is a little bit lower than I would have hoped. Really the only interaction comes in the form of there's red cards instead of some of these with greens on the outside that can affect the landscape, or like predators can eat other animals, and if you're really trying to build a community, you can kind of wreck that strategy a little bit, but not a whole lot. The interaction in this game's pretty low. Now, if I had to give my recommendation for this game, I'd say it's a good game, but to own it, you may not need it, but this is a perfect board game cafe game. If I was just gonna go eat some food, have some drinks with one other person as a 2-player game, this is perfect. In about an hour and 10 minutes, you could finish a game. Doesn't take up too much space, doesn't take up, you know, a ton of brain power, and it's nice and easy to play. And once you're done, you both feel accomplished that you put this continent together. This is one of those games, I don't know how often I'll get it out. I definitely like it because of the ease it is to get out. But as far as, you know, would this be a go-to in the collection for 2? I think there's other games for that, but if I'm going to like a board game cafe and I don't want to pull out like a super heavy game, you know, a Rebellion or a War of the Ring, and just want to play a good hour-long game, this game fits the bill. It's nice and easy. The components are easy to get to. It'd be easy to set up to the table and take down once you're done. So, like I said, I think this is it's a good game, but for me, I don't know if this will end up in the permanent collection for me. So that's what I thought of Ecos, and until next time.